So let's get started. So Learning Council News Media, we have a sizable audience, 310,000 in readership. Some of our press releases of our own stories beyond get picked up by Yahoo, LA Times, New York Times. Our research is kind of a big deal. So we get about 20 million, 21 million sometimes in what we're putting out. But I'm showing you an article up here, and I'll give you a link to it in a second. I wrote an article on AI and the 7 things. So we did a bunch of research on what makes us human, which was so great that Kimberly was talking about humanity, because really what's actually happening in schools, when you see and understand the research, the shift in education is taking us to a different structure. We're gonna be something else. And I'm not talking about all online or all distance. I'm talking about something else. And some of the first schools in the country to talk about this were in Salt Lake, where you're from, that maybe we're gonna even start changing the subjects, like a lot of differences in subjects. And so this question of humanity with AI on the scene is high on our list of discussion topics. Okay, so you might wanna read that article because it's fully researched. So I do a lot of podcasting. You can find me on 28 different channels. And one of the things I like to talk about the most, so ask me anything you wanna know today, is what's really going on in software. What's different in technology that is going to change the structure of learning execution and why that's meaningful. So another thing that we just put out, this is in our latest special report, which isn't printed for you, but this one's online, is that, see the last 2 lines here? People don't know what they want until you show it to them. Our task is to give you things that are not yet on the page. So what I really want to hope that you get out of today is not things that are discussing the way you normally operate, but what you're going to be when you're a different operation, and what that means for the students, and how that fits and is in sync with the present culture and technologies. What they get from other industries impacts their outside life, and therefore what they expect when they get to school. And I'm telling you that because we're seeing in the data that a huge part of the lack of engagement is school out of syncness with their outside world. I mean, they're out there when they're 2 and 3, they already have an iPhone or an iPad. 5, 6, 7, they're playing Minecraft, and they come to school and you give them a paper document. Do you see? They're coming from a world you don't live in, and you're expecting them to conform to your world, but they have no inculcation in that world. In fact, the inculcation we used to have for schools was church. Going to church and sitting in rows and listening, okay? Church attendance is way down in America. So they don't have that, and then they get to your regimented environment and it's alien. So I can go on and on about that. Okay, so we started our work years ago, and this is still online today, creating a dictionary of digital terms for the layman in education so they could understand what's going on inside digital curriculum, okay? What's an avatar, and what is a, well, there's a million of them in there. We're gonna do a whole workshop on it today, so I'm not gonna give it all away. But a whole bunch of educators climbed all over us and said, I want to give you a bunch more definitions. So now it started out as 71, it's over 200 and some now. We redo it every couple of years. But what we found when we were doing it is, see this graphic on the side here, is that the lowest quality of going digital is a document. Okay, a digital document, PDF, or a video, right? Or a soundbite or whatever. And then you get up into single loop animations, which is like what PowerPoint can do, and video, and blah, blah, blah. And all the way up into this mysterious intermix where it's highly valued courseware, okay? This is the disintermediation that's going to happen in education. It already is, and when I show you the data, you'll kind of be blown away. But what happens in education is that the instructional planning and the mindset is, it's all in the teacher's purview. It's all in the digital curriculum or academic side. Kimberly, sorry, I'm going to call you out on this. All your smart people are supposed to do all of that. rather than lean on somebody on the outside world who's done a lot of science of, like letters, right? And they built it and they want to issue it, and your teachers flank it. So a lot of what goes on in purchasing is supplemental. Why? Because we've deferred to the teacher's instructional expertise, even though they're now competing against the open internet and all knowledge of all mankind forever and ever, right? It's a little interesting. We also are doing this. See, the higher value the software side, the more automated it is in terms of its distribution and traffic pattern. It's presenting graphics and allowing you to manipulate them, a little bit like zSpace might talk about today, that you can't do in a whole group setting, but the individual can do, and it's majestic what they learn, right? But also in a whole group setting, you're not necessarily always doing engagement. You're still, like a lot of people, here I'm going to be a hypocrite, right? They're lecturing. They're still doing that even though that's still alien ground. And I'll mention the church thing again, right? This is alien ground. So your burdens on the teaching level nationally, 3.3 million teachers building all their own instructional sequences versus leaning on automation is huge. 3.3 million duplicating all of each other's work across all of America. The sharing factor is kind of cutely in, teachers pay teachers and stuff like that, but that's not like, it's not the full level of software capacities. Okay, so that's where we started, and I've been talking about that for years. And then we started talking about design of the education workflow. Okay, this was pre-pandemic. I know that's an impossible slide to see, but it essentially goes into what are the systemic inequities of structure itself. So if we're built as a manufacturing line, we are telling you when you're 8 years old, you're the same as all the other 8-year-olds. And you're going to get the same stuff in a small group as everybody else and stay with your group. So we start with the conception that you're not an individual. You're like other people your same age. Well, there are natural developmental issues, right? But what if you didn't have your math brain turn on until 2 years after your peers, but you're way ahead of them in language? What if that was a situation for you? Okay, or you were started in school too young. You're just behind in every way, socially, intellectually, every way. And so you're just now branded a failure pretty much the rest of the way. Does anybody know any schools where a lot of the kids have IEPs? Raise your hand. Okay. Most of the southern states and some of the northeastern states, they'll tell you every kid has an IEP these days. This is telling you something culturally about what's happening out there. What's going on? That whole grouping, everybody the same, doesn't fit in any other industry at all. It's not part of the thinking of society anymore, that we're all the same. Here's another thing. When you look at kids today and what they're trying to do, they're really into self-identity. They're really into who they are, right? This is not like earlier generations. And we have to observe the truth of that. So structure became really important to us. We talked about hybrid high flex because the basic organizing structure is itself inequitable. It's forcing you to be the same right from the get-go. Now, if you change structure and go to pace-based, it doesn't mean you have to change everything. It just means that now you got to get super duper duper organized, like you were talking about, Kimberly, with what you're doing your viable curriculum map. Because if whole grouping has a possibility of not living the century out, then you might have super smart kids that go, finish that, met with the teacher, finish that, met with the teacher, finish that, they're kick me up to the next teacher, okay, because they're fast. Meanwhile, teachers' attention's on the kids who need some help because they're not fast enough, right? They're not getting it, okay? It's a good use of, more efficient use of teacher time. But if you don't build the map all the way through, you can't release them into the future. Stay with the group. That's where you get your bored, really smart kids, okay? And then your slower kids are trying to be pulled into the middle, and if they're not, they're triaged and failed. We never want to admit to that, but that is what we're doing. So change in structure started to have our attention on how does FedEx get a box anywhere in the world in 24 hours? What kind of logistics go into that? Whoa, right? How does Amazon get a cold box of ice cream on your front doorstep in under an hour when you're sitting at a soccer game and you and the kids decide, I want ice cream when I get home? And they get it done. How do they do that? Logistics. We have very little logistics technology in education today because we're siloed into practices, okay? Not only bureaucratically on a program level, but teacher empowerment is almost extreme. Thou shalt have all the power in the world, what the teacher says goes. Why? Because we're afraid we're going to lose them. This may be wrong-headed. And I'll get into details on that. Okay, so then we looked at, and this is a special report you have right now, what are the 4 ways that we're trying to change? And one of the ways is we're trying to school consolidate. We don't have enough kids now, we lost a bunch. I mean, some of the school districts in America since the pandemic have lost hundreds of thousands, like Los Angeles Unified. 730,000 kids to 430,000, and last year going into the year they lost another 50,000. That's massive. So we talk about matrix digital in that special report. We also talk about the fact that what the typical administrator and states even, I'm not calling you guys out, I know you're at the state, but they'll try to go, okay, good, let's raise some alternatives. Let's let there be charters because we're getting a little rebellion down at the citizen level, okay? California stood up 630 community schools to compete with themselves, okay? The market is fracturing, but it's worse than you think. And I'm not trying to be a bummer. I'm just telling you, this whole conversation goes a lot deeper than people are typically thinking with, right? Like Addison Davis, the superintendent down in Hillsborough, which is in Tampa, Florida, he spoke for us last year, and then this year he hosted us in Tampa. And one of the first things he said was that he's in a fight with the state over his borders because he's losing kids. And if you look from the outside in, what you're seeing is a pressure in every direction on our structure. So we said, what would a workflow pattern look like? And we started demonstrating this a couple years ago. What would it be to workflow out down to the individual, but not sacrifice the human teaching intersection, but change that intersection? Still some lecture, still some whole group, mostly small group, some one-on-one. How do you change that with logistics? So we started a project called the Hybrid Logistics Project, which would do something that we identified as the core thing that was missing in this industry, which is auto-cohorting, which means student pace, individual student pace, but using the nearest neighbor algorithm, putting groups together to do traditional classwork. Small group discussion, whole group, labs, hands-on, sometimes one-on-ones, okay? So watching from the top down the pace of all the individual students, pulling out these 5, do this lecture, pull out these 4, these guys need this discussion, okay? In the meantime, the teacher's roaming. So you take off the back of the teacher the issue of always managing the classroom and then start only doing purposeful intersection. Okay, this is what corporate America does now. They put everybody in their little cubicle farms or offices, and then they go out and they reserve the meeting space, and then they go to the meeting space, have a purposeful togetherness, and separate back out. Now, this is what most of culture is doing now. Like all of corporate America has been fighting with their bosses since the pandemic. Is like, I don't want to go back to the office. Office space in America is in a billion, almost $1 trillion free fall of value. Okay? It's not going to come back. This is the same transition to what we call the experience age, just leapfrogging the technology age, as we had from the agrarian age to the industrial age. People left the farms and they flooded into cities. And they learned to live very close together in cubicles. During the pandemic, they all wanted to leave the cities, and many of them did. And now they would prefer never to go back in there. Do you see this flow pattern? Apply it to a school. They're fighting with you. They're absent. They're not coming back at all for one very clear reason. Your flow pattern and togetherness pattern is out of sync with every other flow pattern that we have in society. Does it make sense? They see it. And when you make them go there, they're thinking, why are you marginalizing me? I feel like both my parents work from home and I have to go somewhere all day long, and the parents are fighting you too. They're like, can't we have them home more? Atlanta Public Schools now, almost every single school around Atlanta has Friday distance learning days. They're all at home. Saves on busing, saves on lighting the buildings, saves on everything, okay? They even send boxed lunches home. So when we looked at what you could do, we said that these big battleships, like Kimberly, your district, there's no way you can move a big battleship quickly. It's too big. Can't do it. But let's say you did what Lammersville ISD in California did and said, I'm going to open up one free hour in the morning called a rolling drop-off hour. It's like a homeroom for everybody. And another free hour in the afternoon, I'm going to tighten up everything else in the middle of the day, and I'm going to do office hours in the middle of the day with teachers, like over, staggered lunch. And that way I can pull homeschoolers in, if I'm allowed to. And I can alter schedules for high schools. And I can put remedial in my open times, flex times. And I can put all my electives in there. And I can offer even more electives because they can all be online. I can use people from the Louvre to teach, art. The whole world is open up to you now in terms of tutoring, global teaching, that kind of thing. Why don't we do it that way? So you can alter schedule now, keeping your physical on-campus strictly within the middle of the day and open up all the rest of the day. And now suddenly people want to go. Especially if you do the real flip, which is all on the curriculum side, which is, we called it flipped learning during the pandemic, purposeful togetherness. The rest you do somewhere else. You're reading, you're watching of things, you're doing your worksheets, your essays. Why do we need to be in the same room when we're doing that? We don't. We might need to pair kids up once in a while, but AI could take care of that too. So a project came about during the pandemic to build that. It looks like that. It's already in pilot. And I'll only have you notice one thing because the screen's kind of far away from you. The second line there says, what's your cohort size? And when you make one of these meetings, if you gave all 30 or 50 or 80 kids this meeting, and you said set it every 5 kids, it would automatically wait for you, and you. You're the last one in, 5th. Then it would trigger the meeting. So it triggers a multi-meeting every 5. It also knows things like, if you did your homework the night before this meeting, that's already now set on the calendar because these 5 did it, it would say, add him because I don't want him to wait till the next cohort. So this meeting's going to have 6 kids. It also would know at the very end, it didn't have 5, it only had 2 left, and to trigger it the last one. It would also know as a meeting to stay open permanently so I could add new kids that just got in my school at any time, and they would just start traversing the same pathway. They might catch up with the tail end of the earlier group. So that's the type of algorithms that are being built now for education, calendaring. So because you already have 98 systems at least, and 3,000 pieces of courseware and 98,000 videos and a million documents, you don't want more stuff. So we designed this so that once you create one of those meetings, you can have a link, and then you just do the instructions, whatever system you're using, and everybody learns to not hit the link until they finish what they were told to do. Now they're entered in the meeting. So the meetings float, in other words. They don't set on a firm time. Until everybody who was supposed to do it hit the button or hit the link. Okay, so let's talk to you about your workflow a lot. Let's talk to you about strategic planning, how you actually have your plans. Because one of the things we found all across the nation when we go out and talk to schools, even though they might be failing, they're not actually tying their goals and purposes and quote unquote strategy to execution, the way corporate America will write a strategic plan. A real strategic plan is almost military style. It's like program, here's your program, da 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 da. What are your sub officers doing? What are each of them doing day by day? And then pull up all the stats one by one from everybody. There's a lot of practice in education that is not precision. And that's because we're dealing with humans, right? But there could be a lot more. Just like the healthcare practice, right? A lot more precision over the last 100 years. So, this is one school that's using learning logistics now, hybrid logistics, doing really, really, really well. Here was their journey. They had a couple of girls, and they happen to be on that table right there, that were not doing well in public education because they were way too smart. They were 3 grades ahead in every subject of their peers. And they were bored. So when Felicia got a hold of them, she tested them into aspects of courseware, right? And put them on higher grade level path. So she removed them from the peer structure entirely. She also had a 9th grade boy who was only on 2nd grade materials and everything. But once he was put into courseware, the only problem he had was that it looked too babyish, which I've been talking to the software companies about, right? Like, don't make it too babyish, right? Because these older kids that might have to be remedial, they don't want to do that. But once he got the idea that no one knew but him, he flourished. He started knocking down 3 grades at a time. But that is true customization on pathway. So as I'm talking about this, I know you guys probably have a million questions for me, like, how is that possible? Let me give you the data for what makes me think this way. This is the research data. Okay, so first of all, where are all the students? What is happening? Now, the federal government will give you their NCES or federal DOE numbers, but those numbers are based on enrollment. And there are 10 states that don't require you to tell anybody anything. If you're a parent, you don't want your kids to go. Okay? And there's no tracking of most of the immigrant population, which is approaching 50 million Americans now out of our 333 million. Now that includes legal and illegal immigration. So you have 50 million people, and a lot of them are not tracked at all. The student numbers we call the off-grid are the completely untracked, but they're showing up in the consumer markets from the other numbers from, like, the big mobile companies can tell us what those numbers are. Mobile phone companies, because they can see it. So we're down to 62 million in traditional public. Now, those are not the federal numbers. The federal numbers are much lower. Okay? But this is straight off the United States Census Bureau. They have a better lock on this than anyone. So we're really looking at a situation where what is going on with the disintermediation of our market? Why is this happening? All right, where are the teachers? This is the next data point that we think is really important. We're about 1 million shy of what we need for human teachers in America. That's about 24 to 28% of every district's classrooms. Empty. Mad scramble. It's creating a desperation effect. New Mexico hauled in the National Guard to teach. Like, that's how desperate, okay? Scared. There was stories of this online, like, don't let them wear their officer uniforms. They're scaring the 5-year-olds. So that's how serious it is. So what's also happening, so it's inflecting in 2 different directions. Number 1, people calling in outside tutors. Number 2, doing things with time and space to have fewer teachers do more, but when together doing higher value things. Like, if you're going to do a lecture, let's make sure it's fantastic. The audio works, like Lightspeed stuff here, or they're doing some AR, VR stuff. There's a reason to be there. Like, there's reasons that are more than you used to have. Okay. Here's the other thing. And you can't read all this, but that's each individual state over there. We have a 25% chronic absence rate. I know that I've heard several superintendents now since I've been on the road say to me, the reason why is they're just not culturally being raised by their parents to know that showing up is really important. I kind of disagree. I think we have ongoing health issues, right? I think we also have an issue where they just don't see the reason why you exist. They're not, the question is not, do I want to learn? The question is the institution. The fact of the structure of the institution. They don't get it. Mommy doesn't go anywhere all day. She works, right? What's going on, right? They don't get it. It's not that they don't want to be socialized. It's that they don't get to socialize anyway. There's not a lot of purposeful socialization. All right. We just had North Carolina, September 22nd, pass choice law. Okay. So there's 10 states now with choice law. It's at least $8 billion in vouchers in the air right now. It's pulling in all the big boys. The biggest corporations in American education are throwing a lot of money at disintermediating traditional public education. And the more states that pass this, the more that will. So I think every state's going to do this within 5 years. And here's why. The average school district is spending upwards of $15,000 per student. Some of them, like I was just in Baltimore, it's over $21,000 per student. New York's got over $31,000 per student. And a voucher, $7,000. The states are going to see the writing on the wall and go, I can save a third, if not 5 times what I spend now, and I can undercut what I spend now and wipe out bajillions of my budget if I just let vouchers for everyone, whether you're public or private. They're going to see the writing on the wall financially, and they're going to go for it. People will fight it, I agree. But this is really big. This is really big money, and it'll mostly try to be being presented as directly and only online, okay, online schools. But some of these big companies are already, we're hearing it on the media side, they're already talking about, okay, this is great. We're also going to open retail stores like Mathnasium, okay? Mathnasium is the nation's fastest growing retailer because they will customize an individually paced plan for your child. And people will pay for that. It's better than Build-A-Bear, right? It's actual achievement. So, I talked about this a little bit already. Alpha generation is also very different. These are just 4 points. There's a lot more I could go over with you. These are the kids in school right now, okay? Number 1, they prefer the screen to you, the humans. And you can see it everywhere you go. They're in that screen all the time. This is an effect on socialization and the structure of their minds that we have not calculated in almost at all with how we teach, okay? They prefer texting and video over live conversation. In fact, things coming out of people's live mouths, what is that, right? It's literally. Having attention for more than, I think it's 7 minutes average. Adults right now, you guys have the 20-minute average of attention span, so you're going to shut me off any second here. But 7 minutes, they're like gone, maybe sooner, because their mind is set to scrolling bits of information, okay? Swipe, 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 short. Why is Instagram so popular, right? TikTok. Short. This is how fast the attention moves. You see that? You're talking to me? Switch. You're talking to me? Switch. What's happening in the mind? Have we done anything about that in our curriculum? Have we had them sit down and actually learn how to pay attention? No. We're expecting it, but it's not there. So they're absent or they bug out or their mind just doesn't get it and they test low. Maybe they're not hearing you, which is what I've heard Tony talk a lot about from Lightspeed. Why? Because they've already blown out their eardrums years ago, right? All right, let's talk about the hard data from the surveys. So good skew, 30% urban, 40% suburban, 30% rural. We had over 7,000 survey responders. A good traditional public, charters, privates, you know. And then on the teacher side, about the same split. Here's what you're spending on digital curriculum and hardware and all the other things you do digital. And I'm just calling this out because I could call out what you spend on buses and everything else, and that'd be sort of boring. But because technology is the crux of the shift for all the other industries, so it's the crux of the shift, makes logical sense for education, right? So this was the biggest year on record, 2022 was. Massive amount of money, okay? We finally got past this pandemic like disorientation where people were like, what are we doing, masks. Let's give everybody like plexiglass, let's freak out. And started buying software to go with the hardware, okay? Because, at home, running a full lecture style class with 7-year-olds just wasn't working. Distance learning, right? They don't have that much of attention span. So we spent that. Here's where it went. Not in hardware. Hardware is like 2 years ago. Except if it's in the enhancement field, but it's not. If it's not an interpersonal device like an iPad or a computer. Okay. So this huge spike in scientific equipment, this audio-visual realm, AR, VR, but not for devices because everybody bought them. That was a while ago. But major software systems were down. This was concerning to us for this reason. We know the market is in massive disarray. We know you have 2,000 to 3,000 types of software alone. When you start adding up all the individual files, you're in the millions of files. You are in complete digital disarray and expecting it to be managed, collated, organized by every single individual teacher. It's not necessarily always a structural thing you're doing at the district level. So what's happening for you is that if you lose one teacher, you lose order and access and continuum to the learning because the structure of the files is gone. You also have superintendents like up in Idaho last year, we had a superintendent say he was getting calls at like 9 o'clock at night by screaming parents saying, I can't find the file for blah, 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 blah. Why? Because you had overly nested file systems from teachers, right? So it's like go into this file and then this file and then subfolder this and blah, 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 blah. And when you're 9 years old, you can't figure that out. They're used to playing online games. They're not used to file systems. So it's a very interesting thing, right? How you direct attention digitally is very different than how you direct attention live. So we asked, how much are you spending on digital curriculum? This was the record banner year. It was the most money we've ever seen. A little paper resource also jumped up. But we had an $8.9 billion increase in digital curriculum. But guess what? It's still $9 billion behind what the consumer market spent, okay? During the pandemic, we had a shopping bonanza by parents and grandparents trying to find digital learning for their kids. And here's what they learned when they did found it. There's an app that'll teach, addition, subtraction. There's apps that'll teach you calculus. They're discrete learning apps. They'll teach you your colors, your alphabet, your this. There's also full online learning pathways from online companies you've never heard of. That'll sell it straight to you as a homeschooler or whatever. There's an app for everything, I'm just saying. And a discrete learning object library and video library for almost everything. Kids spend an enormous amount of time on YouTube and all the other video sites, right? If I want to figure out how to build a house, trust me, I could be a plumber from YouTube, right? So they're finding it and they're spending on it, and it is a disintermediation of you as a source of knowledge. So you're a formalized source of knowledge. But I would challenge you to think how apparent that is and how calculatingly precise it is. This is a branding issue. Your brand is human, but humans in a precise array of customized learning is what people want. All right, so let me show you what your market is actually doing. So the telecommunications company can tell us what's happening in app industry, and then there's a lot of other parts of the spend. But notice at the bottom, you're the gold bar in your spend in traditional public on private. Private schools is a little bit different. But then you've got your own students spending $6.8 billion on outside things. They're also learning the amazing craft of digital courseware and digital things outside of you. And if they come to school and you've got teachers that you're letting and not leading, and they're going, I'm just going to use paper, I'm not into that right now. What's happening? There's actually a feeling of fear in the students that they're being left behind. Because this is alien. There are kids in schools today that have never seen a book when they get to school. Paper, never seen it. They read all of Harry Potter online though, right? So, this is what you're spending. I know this is an eye chart. The teachers are those light blue columns. And notice how their percentages are high on almost everything. They want to buy everything and they're considering using it. They were considering using it back in 2021, and in 2022 they still are. But notice what's at the top of the thing for the administrators. Social emotional, logistics calendaring, drones, learning object repository. Those are the biggies. Here's what I have to say. The first one, social emotional, is an obvious, because post-pandemic people are seeing that humanity is a critical thing to try to level up to, but I would argue that it's been that way for a really long time. We just didn't notice. It's been affecting everything for a long time. The subject of our humanity against the onslaught, tidal wave of all technology everywhere, and the fact that we have a lot of words in our language that almost treat us like we're machines, and if we're a cog in the wheel, then we might as well just be gone. There's a lot of that going on. The fact that we need to raise our sense of what it means to be a human has been happening for a long time. But the second one really kills us, because we know people don't really know what hybrid logistics advanced AI calendaring actually is. We know they don't know it. But the fact that it was answered that way tells you one thing. People are aware that time is important. How you use time effectively to really engage the students for real is really a big deal. Okay. This is the what pressures do you feel number. Some superintendents were answering like 5, 5, 5 on all the pressures, but this is a weighted average. Number 1, social emotional. Number 2, expectation of better digital communications. People are all over schools right now about like, what do you mean we can't? You didn't tell us what? Right? What's going on? Why can't I have the test scores the same day? What? All that kind of thing. Now here's what the teachers responded. Their biggest problem is higher absences. Now that wouldn't be a problem if it's all pace-based. It's only a problem because you're trying to whole group. It's a herd. You got to get them all through a certain time. So if you miss windows of that time in there, you see? All right. What are the reasons for attrition? Number 1, post-pandemic, they want a flexible schedule. It's number 1. And we're not doing it unless it's purely online. And even then, most online and distance learning is whole group. Okay? What are the operationally unstable areas? Instructional priorities or directives are constantly changing. Now, if you look at a ship going down, people are like all running around trying to bail water out, get the lifeboats out, everybody get your life jackets on. It's like program after program of freak out, right? When your ship is going down, you will throw anything at trying to make this work to save everybody, okay? And it will take somebody's fancy that this is what we need. And then it'll take somebody's fancy that this is what we need. And then what's happening to the troops at the bottom is like, get your act together, right? They're like, don't even give me one more thing to do because I will quit. And then you freak out as administrators anyway because you're afraid to lose them, right? And they're cute, so, you know, you don't want to lose them. So that's actually what's happening there, is if you step back as a trained leader and look at all of the things going on and the tension in the room, what it's really telling is you're not built for this age. You're not built for this. You are Kmart in an aged Amazon. You're not built for this. So structure is the attention that leaders, where the leadership attention needs to be on. It's structure, personalization, and engagement next. That's the second one. Because there better be a reason to be there if there's going to still be there-ness. It better be good. Okay, we asked, what do teachers think they do versus what administrators think teachers do? Isn't it interesting that they're not on the same page? Like, I don't know how you run an organization where I think you're doing one thing and you're thinking you're doing something else. And I don't know that you're doing something else, okay? What's really fascinating to me is teachers get it more than you think. Teachers get to the tune of 40-some% of that guide level, the dark blue bar, the 80-20 in the 13%, those are the additional comments, and then the facilitator 8%, that's 40%. That they are a guide, a specialist, or a facilitator. That is not the same role we had in previous generations, okay? So the first two up there, that's formal knowledge, that's lecturing, and being the source, sort of a self-important professor kind of a thing, right? I don't know how you compete against an open global internet, but go on with your bad self, right? But that thing that's going right there, that's not what the teachers see as the future. They're 40% now are reaching for how do I create excitement when you're here? How do I flank courseware so that I can watch the data and SWAT team my way in and fix you? That's what they want to be doing. And that's what they see their role at a way higher rate than administrators see it. Administrators aren't seeing it yet, which is why Learning Council is on the road. We want to talk to the leaders and tell you this data, right? Because this is shocking. The 2023 data is asking also for what is your definition of a student? And we are already shocked that most people have never defined that word. You got portrait of graduate. Good for you. Okay, so we asked, what are your top needs? Number one, time. See how time keeps coming up at the top? Time. Time is the pivot point into your future. It is what's different from the industrial age in the tech age. Time, your use of time, your use of space. It's all about logistics. There's probably many, many ways to skin this cat, so to speak, right? Many ways to fix time and space. But that is the crux of the pain. And if you step back, you can see it. Okay, we asked what are the 3 duties teachers spend, and they spend 40% spend approximately 20 hours a week on 3 things. Finding resources, because they're not very well organized, collating them into a lesson, okay, and then digital traffic. Because if you haven't observed this, digital traffic is higher than physical classroom traffic. Because if I tell you all at once, do this, I'll get some hand raised I can handle right there, and 3 other people heard it, okay? But if I email you all your stuff, I'm going to get pelted with questions from every direction, and all of the incoming things come in individually, okay? There's just more traffic in the digital world than there was in the physical world, okay? It's not an observed phenomenon by many leadership, but the fact is it's there, and it's not managed by workflow in a very efficient way. Okay? So, we asked how many things do you have? I've already been over this as an average of 2,000 to 3,000 per school. And that's just the big stuff. That's like your Z-Space, right? It's Brain Pop, Lexia, Scholastic, Letters is in there, right? We ask, how do you do your resource planning? Because we believe that you need to get to the point where you have a fully laid out, viable curriculum map, which means the highway has been laid for every lesson across all of 6th grade math, so that it could be individually traversed, and then it's reverse engineered back in there, the points of intersection with teaching. What are those precision points? So if you think with non-togetherness, when exactly do I need to have this lecture executed? When is this a hands-on project? When is this a chapter discussion? When do we need to do our worksheets while we're together so I can break people up into groups of 2s and 3s? Okay? But first I lay down the entire highway. Okay? That's not done, and in fact, our research shows that the majority of teachers might have all of September done for the first part of the school year, and then they fly by the seat of their pants every weekend for the rest of the year. It's not built, unless you're an online school. Right? So, we also found Wi-Fi is a big deal, remote hotspots, that's an equity issue, but we also found more teachers are using the students' phones in class to do quizzes and stuff. We also found teachers are split on remote work, but most of you guys as administrators, over half of you do want to work from home. This should tell you something very important. Okay? What model are you and what do you want to be? 63% are traditional model, but only 38% want to be. And there's the rest of the models. You guys can have these slides if you want to study them. So our predictions are you'll spend more, and that's showing up on deals this year. That'll continue into next year. Because despite the fact that they always talk about a funding cliff, the last big stimulus during the Obama years took 3 years longer to spend. And it was like 1/100th the size of the amount of money in the market right now. They can't pull it away unless they change legislation. So it will take a long time, and the feds are still sitting on many billions of dollars. Even though they're trying to give you a deadline, they'll miss it. It's just our prediction, okay? The deadline won't, you'll still be able to get more money, okay? Believe. So what's happening right now is that the problems of K-12 is that the institution itself is in question. It is the same question you ask yourself, should I just order this on Amazon or Walmart online, or should I run to the store? That is the question. How many of you guys shop at Amazon? You got boxes in your garage? Just saying. You become an entity that is both physical and virtual all the time. And a community of interest that is like a social media hub. Does it make sense? So that's what we see as the future. So it's all about workflow, but then your attention also has to be rooted on this, and this is a really good point we're going to talk about a lot today. What is a human? What are your unique capacities? How do I make that like its own subject? That it develop your humanness. Because you're going to go to market competing directly with AI. Every one of those kids. What makes them human? Every employer in America right now would like to hire you if you have creativity. We don't teach creativity, we almost teach it out. Necessarily, right? So there's a lot to what I just said to you, but I just gave you a world view you might not have had before as to where things are going and what's inevitable about it, right? And it comes, if you have your own examples in your mind, you know at the gut level that it's true. So the last thing I'm going to have you do is go look at this article, because we're going to talk about this in a little bit. But I think it's time for a break, right?